Hitting levels, we're good. You guys ready to run?
Almost, yeah.
What is the packet advantage?
Welcome to the Hashtime Show, your weekly review of cybersecurity news and info. This is episode number 3. On today's show, Dave, Chris, and Jeff discuss the White House Cyber Workforce Initiative and dive into the packet advantage. Check us out online at hashtimeshow.com. And now, on to the show.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. We're on episode number 3 of our podcast, the Hashtime Show. My name's Chris Vincent. I'm one of your hosts. With me today is Jeff Marshall and Dave Norland. We're back, and we're going to talk about cybersecurity again this week, guys. What do you think?
I'm ready to talk about cybersecurity.
I don't know what else we talk about.
What else will we talk about?
We'll talk about whatever you want, Chris.
Actually, that leads me in to segment number 1 we like to call Getting to Know You around the hash table. And I wanted to actually ask you guys, if you weren't doing cybersecurity, what would be your next industry you might be in? What excites you? It could be anything. Jeff, I'll start with you.
Billionaire on the beach? I don't know.
It's not an industry. Well, we know you love. So last week you told us about how you love IT. You've been doing it for a long time. But
yeah.
Would it just be general IT?
So I actually started to go to school to be an architect. So that was kind of my original career path was, CAD and architecture and designing buildings.
Okay, so you'd be an architect in New York or San Francisco.
Now I realize how boring that sounds, but
I'd be an architect on the beach.
There you go.
As a billionaire.
A beach architect.
A beach billionaire architect.
All right, Jeff Marshall, CISO / architect. We got that from here on out. Awesome. Dave, what about you?
I have too many interests, but I do have 2 big passions outside of cybersecurity, and that would be aviation and ancient history. So I would probably be a test pilot that flies around Greece, writing books on ancient Greek things.
that's very specific.
Yeah, I know.
It's not an industry.
It's not an industry. It's a cottage industry right now, but I'm hoping to grow it. So.
Yeah. And for me, I guess if I wasn't in cyber, if I had to pick an industry right now, I would probably be in electric, either self-driving cars or in the space of, reusable, some of the stuff that Tesla's doing. And I have a friend that works at a bus manufacturer. They make electric buses. I'd probably be interested in that space. I think it's a growing industry that I don't see going away. Yeah. Of course, it's funny. People say, oh, hey, it's green energy. Well, there's a lot of coltane that goes into those batteries. So I don't know how green it is, but
I think there's a lot of explosive growth for the electric car industry.
That's a good one. Yeah. So I think I'd be there. All right, cool. Enough about that. Let's get into our next segment of the week, our news section, hashing it out. So let's talk about headline number 1, guys. Let me read this. Researchers weigh in on Trump's cyber workforce executive order. This is a post over on threatpost.com. They were chatting about one of the initiatives from the government they put out. I'm going to read this quote, so bear with me for a second. While outlining no specific steps or actions, the order creates a directive to create a superior cybersecurity workforce that will promote American prosperity and preserve peace and strengthen the ability of the nation to identify and mitigate cybersecurity vulnerabilities in critical infrastructure and defense systems. Every quote read from the government is super wordy, I've noticed.
Absolutely.
So what is this executive order from the White House saying, guys? What is Jeff? Or Dave? What is this saying?
I think there have been several initiatives to create this giant cyber workforce. I think it's kind of unfortunate because you really do have one already, and it's called the military. I have some personal background in this, and the theme when I was in is you work in the Air Force for a little bit, you get some experience, and you immediately leave and go to a private sector job that's going to pay you twice as much. So I think if they really wanted to build this cyber expertise and have this body of people who are ready to jump into these positions and carry out this very important mission, then they would really devote some time to making sure that the guys in the military stay in the military, get even better at what they do, have incentive to be there and be in the service before seeing these other opportunities outside the military. So I think that if they just nurtured it,
I would tend to agree. The number one problem in the government sector is dollars, right? They spend a lot of money, but they don't pay a lot of money. Mm-hmm. We hire a lot of ex-military and ex-government individuals, and we find that their salaries are significantly less. Way back when a buddy of mine and I decided we wanted to be hackers for the FBI or NSA, and went and started going down that path, both being non-military personnel. We couldn't even leave a help desk job to go there because they just don't pay enough.
Sure. Well, it's interesting, right? Because in the private sector, right, who are we protecting? We're protecting usually commercial enterprises, right, that are out there to make money. It's sort of weird that we wouldn't put more of it's almost like our investment on teachers, right? Not to get too political, but we don't invest a lot in the guys that are kind of protecting our borders from a cyber standpoint, right? Mm-hmm. So is there a solution to this other than just throwing more money at it? Is there something that, the executive orders out there to beef up the workforce? We've seen this with the college campus headline from last week. Is there a solution, Dave, that you can see in your mind coming from that world?
I think kind of like Jeff said, you just have to increase the incentives for people. It's easy to say pay people more, but I think it's also a matter of making that schooling on a formal level more accessible. Right now, not to make it a discussion on the price of education, but education is incredibly expensive for people who want to go and get a degree, be it a 4-year or a master's degree, even an associate's degree. That there are costs associated with that have to be overcome to get into the workforce, and it may determine what kind of job they choose. So I think you need to make the return on investment for getting into cybersecurity worth it and incentivize that. It has to be beneficial for the people that want to get into that.
So this is the question I have. I want to kind of dive into this a little bit more. So I hear a lot of guys, they're really into privatizing stuff that the military is taking care of. I hear that all the time, right? Yeah. Let's privatize the roads. Let's privatize prisons. Let's privatize schools and stuff like that. And it sounds great on paper when you talk about it. Oh, that's cool. We'll make we'll get better road service and there'll be competition and whatnot. And I guess the government does this a little bit with they hire people to go over and in certain places where we have a military force, right? They'll hire in, I don't call them mercenaries. I don't know what the right term is. Contractors, that's the right term. Sorry. And so they'll hire in contractors. Is the solution maybe hiring a company to help run national security, cybersecurity? Is that a possible solution? Yeah,
that's exactly what the Army did. And it was taking place when I was there, when I was getting out of that DoD bubble. The Army just basically said, we're kind of done with training a lot of people who can do cybersecurity as part of our service. So we're just going to devote a lot of those resources to hiring contractors and subcontractors. And because a lot of the people who were in the Army doing those types of jobs would then find themselves in those same contracting positions. So there is some entry points into a contracted position. That could be a cost-effective solution, but that doesn't really speak to the goal of creating a gigantic cyber workforce that has all this expertise. That really, no matter where it's coming from, be it the military or private sector, you just have to make it cost-effective. People look at education as a return on investment, and they need to know they can get an affordable education from somewhere that's credible and be able to make a buck once they get done.
Yeah, it's so that's a whole other conversation. That's out of probably the scope of this podcast.
This maybe reaches beyond cybersecurity.
Because I've been listening to stuff recently about the Cox Education. It's a huge driver right now. We're getting to a point now where, I don't know, you guys are, you guys came from a world probably like me, where when I was in high school, going to college was the only avenue. You had to go to college, and the message definitely from my parents was go to school, get a good job, at a company that's stable, kind of retire with benefits. That was kind of the messaging when I was going to school. I was born in 83. So, I was going to college around 01, 02. That was the messaging still. But then we saw some stuff happen since then with the 08 market crash, some of the things that changed with technology. Look at the iPhones done to the society in the last 10 years. So that messaging, and now look at the kids that can create a YouTube channel and make money while they're still in high school that would far advance what they could possibly do with a college degree type job. So maybe that's changing a little bit. I mean, do you think there's an opportunity for people to get into cyber without having the formal education, or is it you have to have a formal education for it?
I mean, you don't have to have a formal education to get into any IT industry. I went to college for 6 months after high school and dropped out and went to work at startups. And I didn't finish my formal education till later in life when I realized how important it was. And I still feel it's important, but it's not a necessity. I mean, we have plenty of people here that work that don't necessarily have a formal education, but they have many years of experience and understanding. So I don't think it's a requirement, but there's a difference between a degree and just cybersecurity training as well, right? So, there's plenty of training around how to be a hacker, how to detect things, forensics, all these expensive classes are out there as well that, we send employees to, and they cost a lot of money. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a degree-based education.
Yeah, I think the perspective here is going to be, let's institutionalize it. Let's make it more formal. And all that costs money. And the reality is all this information is out on the internet that you can go access for free. You can look up some guy's YouTube channel and get some incredibly valuable and accurate information and basically teach yourself. But the government's approach is not going to be, okay, everybody go watch YouTube and
Sure.
bone up on security concepts. It's going to be, let's throw some money at the issue. Let's educate people formally. And I think if they're going to be successful, they need to find a cost-effective, reasonable way of doing that.
Yeah, and I think one of the other key things of this initiative is nowhere in the initiative does it really spell out anything. It just says that we need this, which is an obvious case. But
Sort of speaking of the crowd there a little bit.
Yeah.
The platitudes don't set policy. It's like, how are you going to actually do this?
Yeah.
where's the rubber meet the road?
Yeah.
I think that one last point on this, and then we'll move on. I think the internet's great and YouTube's great for learning a lot of stuff, right? But I think that you can't just go to school on YouTube, right? There's having a formality, or you can't do anything on YouTube. Honestly, I mean, you couldn't unless you're super disciplined, right? Having a formality, having a curriculum, having a structure, having mentors, having instructors to be able to guide you is an important part of going to school that I think. Even if you look at something like, I'm really into guitar, right? There's a ton of great videos on YouTube I can learn about playing guitar, but I'll get better if I go sit with somebody who's better than me and he can show me the road that he went on, right?
Sure, yeah.
And that's part of what school does as well for you. And then working in teams, you just can't get that on YouTube.
Yeah, and there are plenty of volunteer groups where they'll take you under their wing, even if you don't know the first thing about, the TCP handshake. There are resources out there to find like-minded people and get into that, industry. And to your point, yeah, you can teach yourself things on YouTube. And I've taught myself things just by watching YouTube videos and reading blogs. And it would have been so much faster if I had someone to ask questions of, if I'd known the terminology to Google or whatever the case may be. So, yeah.
Sure. All right, cool. Let's move on to headline number 2, guys. So fraudsters targeting consumers with one-ring phone scams. So I brought this up, guys, because I'm thinking, I'm coming into the cyber world. I'm thinking, it's the, swordfish and hackers and people port injections and SQL injections, header injections. I'm thinking all, and, now I'm realizing there's a lot of really simple kind of scams of phishing and then this phone hacking. I didn't even like this PBX hacking. And so let me read this quote here because I want to bring this up from our conversation last week. Fraudsters are targeting consumers with one-ring phone scams that exploit people's curiosity so as to trick them into paying exorbitant fees. So what they were doing here, because I actually read this one in detail, basically they're sending a spoof call or they're calling someone from a number. It's international, but it looks local. It's a one-ring hang up. You'll see this a lot with telemarketers. They'll use your area code or use the first 3 digits of your cell phone to get you to call back from telemarketers. But these guys are actually using these paid 800 number, 900 number lines that's charging your phone. They're making money off you, right? I mean, how prevalent? So we talked last week about phishing being like 60%, Jeff, you said, of the breaches we're seeing. How prevalent are we seeing this kind of phone hacking? Is this happening in business too? I mean, how much are we seeing this?
This is one of those things that have been happening longer back than you can even imagine. But, back in the day, people used to, fake numbers or, hang up, you call back, and then they convince you to, log into your computer and things like that. So these aren't new. They've been around forever. I think in the business world, you probably get a little bit less of it, but it's hard to detect because has nothing to do with technology from a network perspective. It's, these people are making phone calls, and a lot of people, get shy and don't want to give up that they were scammed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't want this to be the second episode to talk about a Google service, but Google Assistant. I'm going to do it anyway because it's so good. Google Assistant, you push the screen call button, and then the AI talks back and says, "This Google Fi subscribers uses a screening service. Please state your name and include a brief message." And I get spam phone calls constantly, and I have never had one actually try to say anything to Google Assistant. They just hang up.
Yeah.
So there has to be some kind of business equivalent for that kind of automatically screens these phone calls. And if it doesn't exist now, it's probably going to exist in the next 5 or 6 years.
Do you guys remember the 1-800-COLLECT commercials?
Yeah.
We had a baby, it's a boy. You remember that stuff? It's kind of reminded me of that. You do the Google voice. We had a baby, it's a boy. You hang up, Sorry, I'm getting derailed here. I guess I bring this up. I know it's out of the scope of what we do from a business standpoint. We're looking at more the technology of the network, right? But it goes back to the social engineering piece, right?
Yep.
We sort of, or at least me as an outsider, I come in, I go, this is advanced hacking and it's this crazy stuff. But a lot of the breaches we're finding is human error, right? That's a lot of what the fail mode is. So this is, like Dave said, maybe having a policy in place or a training in place where you don't have to really worry about this happening to you.
Social engineering is fun. I mean, it used to be the day where you were just trying to con people or piggyback off of people to get into a building and find yourself to the server room. But, it's gone much further than that now. And, things like this is, these are usually targeted, groups that are trying to just make a bunch of pennies off of phone calls,
Yeah, definitely. Okay. On the next one, headline number 3. So, Mirrorthief crime group targets online campus stores in the U.S. and Canada with card skimming malware. So basically, these guys were injecting. This was in the shopping cart, right? This was at the. We've seen this stuff, the card skimmers on credit card machines, but this was actually happening at the checkout. I mean, can you guys explain this to me a little bit or provide some color around this?
Yeah. So what they do is they will inject a script into the website. And in this case, I think it was named the same as a Google Analytics script. So when you go through the checkout process, the customer will eventually get to that resource, and that resource is named the same as the legitimate resource. Mm. So what happens is they'll insert their credentials or their payment information or whatever the case, and then I'd have to see the script to look at it, but it will probably take that information and just pass it directly to the existing script, the legitimate one.
Right.
And then in the process, it will steal that information and send it elsewhere. And the consumer will have gone through the transaction never knowing that they just interacted with a malicious web form. So this is kind of it would be a script injection attack.
Yeah. How easy is that to do?
I mean, it all depends on the website and how well it's locked down, how well you've hardened your payment interface. So.
Yeah, a big part of application security is, making sure they're following OWASP Top 10 and following good practices. So, these things happen because good practices aren't followed. So, the more we do due diligence as security professionals to educate developers and add security into the beginning of all these life cycles of software development, that's going to be the key.
I'm catching a theme, Jeff. It's hygiene, security hygiene. Yeah. Got to keep your hygiene clean. We have anything else to add on that, guys? I mean, I guess what I'm starting to notice with this is this is happening all day, every day, constantly across the United States, across the world. There's breaches and injections constantly.
Well, it's easy for third world countries to make a bunch of money now, and as long as we're all connected across this world, and it's easier for these people to scam people far away, it's going to occur constantly. So, it's the nature of the world we are in, and in the future, again, this next war will be a cyber war, right? We hear that all the time, but It's the truth.
Now I'm starting to sound like one of the guys who know, you're going to get breached, man. You're going to get breached. You better get us. It's starting to sound like an infomercial, right? I mean, it's true, though, right? I guess that's the message that I've learned is, and you guys can maybe color around this. It's not a matter of when you're going to be breached. It's not a matter of if, it's when. You're going to be breached at some point. It's how can you contain it and how can you posture yourself better for the future.
Yeah, I think most organizations are going to have some kind of security incident, be it every month or every year. Nobody's perfect. There are always little cracks that things fall through, and you just have to have a plan in place before you get to that point.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. So guys, that's all I had for the news for this week. I wanted to jump in. Let's jump into our last segment of the show today. I'm calling it the hash map. It's our roadmap for success in cybersecurity. And we just had a blog post go up talking about the packet advantage. Why having that packet level detail is superior to just having logs alone. And we actually listed 7 reasons. And check out our website, guys, to find out more about that. For now, though, Dave, I wanted to ask you about that. If you could elaborate a little bit, get into some details. Why? What is the packet advantage?
Yeah, so logs just by themselves are going to tell you how devices respond. They give us a lot of good background information on how devices are configured, the actions that they took in response to certain types of activity. But packets are going to tell you what actually happened, and that's going to give you a lot of advantages in terms of better alerting, more data to query on, and more depth of investigation that you can set your analysts upon and have them dig into, a lower level volume of data.
So let's throw this over to the physical security world, right? My analogy is, if I've got my alarm system and you came in my house and you left, I know you were in there and that you ran out. But with packets, I know you went in there, you stole my damn TV, and you took off with it.
Oh, I got it. So for packets, so for the layman out here, logs would be like the old school alarm system would just beep at you and send like some kind of like Morse code over to your security company. Hey, you had an alarm trigger, right?
Yep.
When we get to the packet level, we're actually getting video footage of what's going on.
Yeah, I know you came in wearing your blue shirt and your ski mask and you stole my TV and took out with it.
Why are the guys in those commercials? Hold on, let me diverge. Why are the guys in the commercials? Something about really good looking dudes in these commercials. It's always the real good looking guys robbing the houses. They both kind of like their brothers or anything. They're both like, they look really similar and good looking. I feel like the guys that rob houses aren't that attractive.
Yeah, probably not.
I'm thinking.
I don't know if you've seen this commercial. I don't remember if it was Wayfair or one of those guys, but essentially these 2 guys come in and then they fall in love with the couch and they take the couch instead of the valuables. It's really ridiculous.
Is that what happens? Dave, you want to add something? Sorry, we're cutting you off. No, we're talking about commercials. So we're off packets.
No, the bank robbery analogy is applicable. So, so to kind of tie it back into one of the earlier news stories we talked about with the skimmer, when they upload that JavaScript file, you might see with logs only a firewall event that said, okay, we had this incoming post. Maybe there's some kind of threat intelligence or a signature built into that firewall that will detect that. But if you don't have something to compare that against, you're going to have a hard time figuring out what actually was in that request. So again, some devices will capture certain headers or they'll capture the entire session. But really with packets, you don't have to compromise. You can have an analyst look at that and they can look at the entire payload. They can extract artifacts out of that if need be, and then either replay them in a sandbox or just read the script and tell you what it's going to do. And then there's zero ambiguity. You don't have to rely on an incomplete log to tell you what took place.
Awesome.
By the way, I was off on that. That was a State Farm commercial, actually.
The discount double check? The same guys?
Yeah.
I met, not to divert, we're almost done with the show here, but I did meet the marketing guy for all that State Farm stuff. That was the brainchild behind that. Not that engaging of a guy, but he's a genius, I guess, Anyways, guys, I appreciate it. Anything else to add before we finish on packets?
No, I think that covers hopefully that makes sense. It's really about visibility. The more visibility you have into your network and you have into the applications, the easier it is to understand what's going on and look for the abnormal activity.
Well, I appreciate the analogy, Jeff, because makes better sense to me. It makes sense abstractly, but when you put it like that, I think in this day and age, we all require that level of visibility. I think that's really important to have. So appreciate it. All right, guys, all the time we have for the show today. Make sure to like and subscribe and check us out, all the fun stuff like that. We'll be back next week with more fun, hot cybersecurity news. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Hashtime Show. Check us out online at hashtimeshow.com.